The Magicians Podcast, brought to you in association with the Magic Circle.
It's the final episode of the series, and we're going to wrap it up with one of the highest profile magicians in the country, Nick Einhorn. Hello everybody, welcome to the Magicians Podcast. I'm Richard Young. As this is the final week of the series, I decided we should go out with a bang with a double bill of episodes. So just in case you've missed it, check out the feed. Episode 23 is also new today. It's with the star of the iMagician tour, Jamie Allen. It's a really interesting interview. Make sure you don't miss it. If you don't follow us on Twitter, please do it now. We are at Magician Podcast, no S on the Magician. If Facebook is your vehicle, please give our page on there a like. Just search for The Magicians Podcast. Nick Einhorn is one of the highest profile magicians in the country. There is a lot of great content in this interview. I'm sure you're going to get something from it. You might even listen to this one more than once. This is the perfect end to the series with one of the most successful magicians in the country. I sincerely hope you get something from this interview. I'm certain you will. Here he is then, Mr. Nick Einhorn. Delighted to say I'm sat in his living room. Nick Einhorn, he's here with me right now. How are you, Nick?
I'm great, thanks, Richard. How are you?
Thanks for doing this.
Pleasure, thanks for asking.
Appreciate it. This is Ground Zero Einhorn Entertainment.
HQ.
Yeah, HQ. How's things been recently with the world of close-up magic and everything?
Yeah, it's good. It's 2014 was a good year, and you never know what's around the corner for 2015, but it's all started pretty good.
Good stuff. I read the Magic Circular from 2006, I believe it was. You did an interview with Matt Field. It was a really interesting interview. There's a few questions in it. Well, I'm going to revisit those questions because it's sort of 9 years later now, and I sort of want to. But I do want to sort of get out some background first of all.
Okay.
So where did you grow up, and did you go to university? I'm interested in kind of your start to life, really.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Gants Hill in Essex with my sister and my mum and dad, and on my 4th birthday, I had a magician come and perform at my party, who was actually my auntie's nephew on the other side of the family, and his name was Lawrence Layton, and he later on became the part of the Zodiac Brothers with Paul Keeve.
All right.
And so he's kind of not a blood relation, but he's kind of related through family, and we're still very good friends to this day. And that was, my first experience of magic at age 4. Got into it. Got a magic set. Dad used to take me to Davenport's and International Magic, and then I kind of found Alan Allen's magic spot and spent a bit of time there. And yeah, the magic bug really bit, I guess. I was always doing it. It's all I've ever known.
You're a really smart guy. Were you academic as well? Did you do well at school? Or?
No, I'm not. I don't consider myself to be that smart, to be honest. School was okay. I never excelled. It was okay. I never went to university. I started doing a dance, music and drama degree, and then found that I couldn't dance, couldn't act and couldn't sing.
All right. So, bit of a problem.
Yeah, so I phoned Marvin Burglass and said, "Get me a job, I need a job." And then he gave me one, which is another story. But yeah. So
it's an amazing story, though, because you were at Marvin's Magic when Michael Jackson visited.
Yeah, I was.
Could you tell us the story of that?
Yeah, that was amazing. So I spent a lot of my early life working for Marvin Burglass, and Marvin's Magic was a great thing to do from a performance point of view, and learning about myself and just how to interact with people. But one day, working in Hamleys, Marvin called through, and the phone was in this little cupboard on the ground floor. I remember it, and he said to me, "Can you stay after work?" And I said, "Well, I really want to stay after work." So he said, "Oh, really, it'd be really helpful if you could stay after work just for a little while." I said, "Well, how long?" And he said, "Well, it might be an hour, it might be 2, maybe 2.5, 3 hours." And we're on the floor from like 10 till 5. So it was a long day. And I said, "Well, I really, do I have to?" And he said, "Well, you might want to stay around." And I said, "Well, why?" And he wouldn't really tell me, and I was a little bit insistent that I just wanted to go home. And then he said, "Look, Michael Jackson's coming in, and we need some people there, and we'd love you to stay behind and be there. And so I kind of went, oh, all right, not a problem, I'll stay. So that was pretty cool, actually, and that was an amazing experience because they literally shut down the whole store, and they backed a big kind of van up to the staff entrance, and they sealed off the staff entrance to the van, and then the doors opened, and in walks Michael Jackson, and there were only probably about a dozen people on the shop floor. Wow!
Did he come and watch the magic? Or?
Yeah, well, he kind of spent a lot of time in the teddy bear section, and then he made his way down to the front, which is where the Marvin's Magic stand was. And at that point, the windows hadn't been covered, and people outside could actually see Michael Jackson through the windows, and they started to start hammering on the glass, and it was causing a bit of a sensation outside, and what seemed like hundreds of people like banging on the glass shouting Michael, Michael, and they actually had to cover the whole of the windows up with Hamley's wrapping paper to stop people looking through. And he came down, and he Richard Griffin did his Dove Act for Michael Jackson.
Wow.
Which was incredible. And I don't recall ever performing a trick for him, although I did spend a little bit of time talking to him. And he gave me his chewing gum and said, is there a trash can? And I kind of took the gum and threw it in the bin, and I'm thinking, if I had kept that gum, it would have been worth a fortune.
That's it. Did you ever have what we would consider a normal job, Nick? Or was it immediately straight Marvin's Magic and then out into the performing world?
I was in advertising very briefly. I liked the idea of media, and I was quite creative, and I wanted to be on the creative side of advertising. But because I never went to university, I didn't get the creative role in the ad agency. So I started at a very small company, which was owned by 4 very, very established people in advertising who had all decided to leave their roles in whatever companies they were in and form their own company. It was called Rainey Kelly Campbell Rolfe. And at the time, it was a very small agency. There were only about 10 people. And I was working on the production side of things, which meant getting the briefs from the companies themselves, putting them into the creative team, and then making sure that they came up with ideas on time. But I was like an 18-year-old kid telling the director of a company that he had to have his work done by 6 p.m. Tuesday afternoon, and you haven't got that much authority at 18, so it didn't really work very well for me, that role.
So how does the career performing magic sort of begin for you? Was it a gradual thing? Were you still living at home with your parents at the time, or how does the business begin to build? Yeah,
I was doing magic shows when I was probably about 13 or 14. I mean, I was really young, and my parents used to drive me to gigs. I mean, I remember standing at home as a kid on the phone to people, kind of negotiating a deal for a children's party when I would do, like £25 for 45 minutes or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was, I always had a diary by the phone, and it was kind of unusual for a 13 or 14-year-old kid to do that. And credit to my parents, they used to drive me around at weekends doing these shows, and it was great fun. And from there, I did the occasional kind of close-up gig at a wedding or a bar mitzvah or that kind of thing, and it just spiraled. And then after I left the advertising, interestingly, I did a trade show, my first trade show, and it was for a company that sold juggling balls, and I had to try and promote juggling balls by doing magic. And whilst I was there was another company exhibiting called Cartamundi, a playing card company, and they saw me working and said, would I like to work on a project with them? And so I kind of went to work on a little project with them, and then they offered me a position in the company. So I then went to work for them as a sales manager for Cartamundi.
Okay.
For 6 months, and then decided that it was still magic that I wanted to concentrate on.
One thing I couldn't quite understand in my research with regards to a timeline was you wrote some amazing books, and they've gone out in lots of different forms. And I wasn't sure exactly at what point in your career that happened, the books that you wrote that were sold to the general public. Yeah,
that came about in 2001. I think I got a call from a publishing company, and that came about purely because of a chance occurrence. I had a call from someone who would see me work, who worked for a newspaper, and said, we're doing an article in, I can't remember whether it was the Times or the Guardian or one of these papers, and said, we just need a quote about magic, and we've got quotes from various people. Would you give us a quote? And so I gave him a quote, and then said, is there any chance of getting my website in there underneath the quote. And she kindly said, well, yes, but if you could do some magic at my sister's wedding in a couple of weeks, I'll get your website in there. So I said, all right, it sounds like a good deal. It's a national newspaper. And so my website was in there, and the publisher of this book, a company called Lorenz Books or Annis Publishing, someone there saw that quote, went to my website, liked the look of me, and then called me from that and said, we're writing a book about magic, or we want to have a book written about magic. We're in discussions with a couple of other magicians, but we'd be interested to speak to you and see what you could do. So I went in and had a chat with them, and I think the other magicians they were talking to were slightly older generation, and they were looking for someone a bit younger, and at the time I was. And it was a massive undertaking, but I wrote this book in 2002, and in 2005 I wrote another book for them, and they've sold collectively over 1 million copies.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Yeah. So were you involved in the actual process of the selection of the tricks in the book? And
everything. I mean, I had an editor that worked with me, but essentially the beginning bit was them saying you got 256 pages or however many pages it was, and you have to fill it with magic, and the first 10 pages will be contents and introduction, and the last 10 pages will be your index or whatever, but we need to fill these, and this is how we want you to do it. And they basically gave me a breakdown of what they thought would work. I then went away and worked out how many magic tricks I could find that would be suitable for that book, break it down into different groups such as card magic or coins or money magic, and then try and kind of slowly it progressed into the point where we had our trick list, and then it was a matter of photographing them. But I was pretty much the one that decided what tricks made the book and how it was all shot.
Was there ever a concern in your head that you're putting together a magic book for the public and there's magic secrets in there? Where in your head were you drawing a line between a trick that's a good beginner trick and a trick that actually uses a method for something that a working magician would use?
Yeah, it's a good question actually, and it did concern me. And the first thing I did is approach the Magic Circle and said, I'd like to write this magic book. Could I have your permission to write it? Which was a good move in terms of for my own satisfaction, to know that I wasn't going against the grain, I wasn't going to upset anyone. And it's really down to the choice of material, and that's based on two things. I mean, first of all, certain things are public domain, and they are so long in existence that a variation of that is not going to hurt magic in any way. But there was certainly a bit of damage limitation in the sense that they, certainly for the second book that I did, they came to me and said, we want a book about illusions. And I said, well, why do you want that? And they said, because we've done one about close-up magic, we want one about all stage illusions and how they work. And I said, well, I'll not be doing that book. And I walked away from it. And I said, what I will do is I will write another book with different stuff, but it won't be about stage illusions, because essentially you're asking people to read how tricks are done, but they're never going to have any chance of ever performing them or making them, because, why would anyone that's not into magic want to perform an illusion? Plus, these ideas belong to certain people, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of damage limitation. I walked away from the book, and then they came back to me about 3 or 4 months later and said, all right, how do you want to do it? And that's how I got the second book. But no, there was a lot of looking at... I spent a lot of time in the Magic Circle library and made a massive list, and some of them made the cut and some of them didn't really. And I think I based it on what I thought would be helpful to an up-and-coming magician, and tried not to expose anything that would damage too many people's routines that they're out using. To be fair, I don't think anyone's really approached me and said I shouldn't have put X, Y, and Z in the book. There's never been an outstanding trick that really upset a lot of people.
Yeah, they're great first books, and still available on Amazon if you want to buy one. So go and have a look. In 3 or 4 different, they've been re-released and new covers and things like that.
Yeah, they break down the book into different chapters, which is slightly frustrating for the buyer, because they can look at a book that has Nick Einhorn on the front and they buy it because they like the other book, only to find that the card magic section is actually just a section from the other book.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. It's nothing to do with me. So occasionally I get an email from someone saying, well, I've just bought this book and I've already got it. And I put them onto the publisher, and the publisher kind of sorts it out. But happens rarely, but yeah, it does happen.
You're a top-end magician, and we don't need to discuss specifics, but I know you charge top-end, you've got top-end clients, and I'm wondering how important your residency at Tottenham Hotspur was with regards to where the direction your business has gone in, with regards to you being now considered, the top-end choice for a close-up magician in the UK?
At Tottenham, I do meet a lot of really interesting clients, and it puts me in touch with people that I wouldn't ordinarily be in touch with. But having said that, I also get the same, or got the same from a lot of other residencies that I did at the time. At one time, early on in my career, I had about 5 or 6 residencies a week.
Wow.
In different parts of London and outside of London. And I worked hard, and I was really hammering it every single week. And one of the best things I ever did was find a residency in the city at a restaurant. And the way that came about is because I started doing magic at Tottenham, and then Martin Peters of 1966 World Cup fame, he said to me, because he was one of the legends at Tottenham that walked around, and he also was a legend at West Ham. And he said to me, "Oh, you should be over at West Ham doing this. It's great. You should do this at West Ham as well." And I said, "Well, I approached West Ham, and they weren't keen to interact, and I never really got a meeting." He went, "Leave it to me, and I'll have a chat with them." And then a week later, I was at West Ham performing magic when I wasn't at Tottenham. So it was Martin Peters that really got me into West Ham. And then at West Ham, I met this restaurateur in one of the lounges who said, "I'd like you to come and do magic in my restaurant in the city." And when I had a meeting with him, and I was quite chuffed with myself because I'd gone in with an idea of what I wanted for the residency. And I'd quoted this price. I was kind of I was really nervous, but I quoted this price and I thought I can always negotiate, but this is what I'm going to start off with. And he just turned around and went, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine." And I didn't have to negotiate or anything. And I came away thinking, this is just unbelievable. So every Wednesday afternoon, I was in the city performing at this restaurant, which then turned into Wednesday and Friday, and then turns into Wednesday and Friday in the city. And then he had another restaurant in South London, which I then did on a Friday night. So that was 3 times a week I was doing that one residency. I think I made a lot of contacts, even people that still use me today. One of my biggest clients that's used me for over 10, 12 years, through a variety of companies he's moved to, I met in that restaurant. And that was a time when the city was buzzing and people were spending a lot of money, and that would put me in direct contact with people that I wanted to be working for. Interestingly, when I left that residency, Jamie Raven worked with the restaurateur's sister at some company, loved magic, and when I left, Jamie took over my residency at that restaurant, and it must be good vibes because he's also done incredibly well.
You don't play the internet game really, do you, with close-up magic? Is there a reason why you've decided to sort of stay away from the search engine optimization game that close-up magicians fight over every week?
Well, first of all, I don't understand that side of things.
Nor do I.
I'm not very tech savvy. Second of all, I use my website purely for people to find more about me, but not from. I won't get work generally from people that have never seen me before. It's either recommendation or it's people that are using me again and again. So I don't use my website really to promote myself to new people. It's mostly for me to forward existing clients to and say, well, actually, this is what I do, this is what I've done, this is what I can do for you. And it's worked pretty well in that way.
In the Magic Circular interview, you talked about in the early days, you actually used to cold call companies and literally try and sell the idea of a magician. How did you go about that? Yeah,
my dad was an insurance salesman, independent financial advisor, and he was a great salesman. And he used to go on these training courses in America. It was called the $1 Million Round Table, and there used to be cassettes that he would bring home of people that were excellent salespeople, motivational speakers, and I used to sit and listen to these as like a 10-year-old kid. And so this notion of making a cold call and getting something from nothing was instilled in my blood from a young age. And my dad still has this great philosophy. When I'm trying to get somewhere and it's not happening, he said to me, every no you get is one no closer to a yes. So if you keep going, eventually you will get that yes. But if you stop, you're never going to get that yes.
It's amazing.
And it was amazing. And I was really interested in the psychology behind trying to sell myself a product and a service. So yes, I used to go to the library before the internet, and I used to make lists out of the yellow pages about places where I thought they would like magic. And then I would literally call them one after the other and try and get meetings and do a presentation for them.
I want to talk about something completely different.
Yeah.
You've won loads of awards, and I've got here 1996 and 2002 Magic Circle Close-Up Magician of the Year. You did FISM twice, second place in 2003 in the Micro Magic category. What I want to talk to you about, though, actually, is something before those awards. I'm not sure if it was the year before or a few years before. You entered the Magic Circle Close-Up Magician of the Year and you weren't placed.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know that to me is just as interesting as the success, actually. When you put your heart and soul into a magic act and you go and do it and you're not placed, are you the type of guy, did that knock you a bit, or?
That was at the Victory Services Club when the Magic Circle used to have the headquarters there. It was a long time ago. And I actually liked that act. I came up with a couple of really nice little touches, but I don't think it helped that Bobby Bernard was one of the judges, and he actually fell asleep and snored during my performance. So I knew it wasn't a great omen. Thought there wasn't much chance of me winning, considering one of the judges wasn't conscious. So competitions are great to inspire you, to try and motivate you to come up with a set for a particular reason, for a particular date. So it didn't really bother me. It's kind of water off a duck's back,
Yeah.
Things happen in this business, and you need really tough skin. Generally, if people don't like what you do, it's hard to hear that someone doesn't like your performance or they don't think you're very good. You just got to dust yourself off and move on to the next performance.
Sure. So when you do finally win it in 96...
great feeling.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, I'll never have that feeling with the close-up magic competition. But, at that period of time as well, in the mid-90s, was it an important title to have? Did it improve your business?
Yeah. It was great. I mean, I don't think it improved my business, but it gives you credibility within the industry and outside of it. So if you can claim to be the Magic Circle Close-Up Magician of the Year, that is a great accolade to have, and it's one that you will always have. So in that respect, it did me good, and it gets you obviously seeing your peers see your act, and if they like it, I mean, that's great as well. So, and it opens you up to maybe different conventions saying, well, we want to have you at this convention or that convention.
Do you enjoy conventions?
I love conventions. I enjoy spending time with other magicians. I think there's an eclectic mix of people within the magic fraternity, and there's some real lively characters, and sometimes it gives you a chance to sit and chat with people who you don't usually have time to sit and chat with, or you wouldn't ordinarily socialise with. And it's good from a creative point of view as well as just kind of letting your hair down. Not that I've got much hair to let down.
So 2003, you go off to FISM and you come second place in the Micro Magic category. What was that like doing FISM, and how long did you work towards that before you got... I think the Magic Circle sponsored you, didn't they?
They did, second time around. The first time around, actually, James Friedman and John Warvett were friends of mine, and we went... James still is, unfortunately. John passed away. But I was very friendly with them at the time, and they said they wanted to invest in something, and they decided to invest in me, and they said they were going to send me to FISM in Dresden.
That was in 97.
That was the early one in 97, and I never got placed, but I worked really hard towards an act, and I was proud of my performance. When I look back on it, considering my age and my experience, I think that I did an okay job. I certainly wasn't deserving of a FISM award, but it was fine. And then when I went back and the Magic Circle sponsored me after the Magic Circle win, I performed again and did really well. And I was staggered, actually, and very honoured to have been placed second, I think joint second with Sean Farquhar. And that was amazing. It really was. But I think a lot of that was down to the fact that, by that stage in my career, I've been very used to standing up and doing a stand-up or stage act for up to hundreds and hundreds of people. And so when I walked onto the stage and you're doing a close-up act in front of 1,000 people, and where the nearest person is like 30 feet away from you, I was used to that as a normal working environment, so I would address the audience. Whereas a lot of magicians that perhaps were in the competition were great magicians, but they were looking down at the table and they were very much close-up workers, which you can't blame them for that. It's a close-up competition. But when you're in that kind of environment, you've got to work the crowd. And I think maybe I did that in a slightly more relaxed and natural way than some of the others, and maybe that's why I did quite well.
I'm interested to know, of all these competition wins, and there's another one which 2005 was the Magic Circle Centenary. Am I right in my understanding that was past winners of the close-up competition. So you're like the champion of champions,
well,
in some ways.
Yeah, that's the way I suppose it'd be described. But it was basically an invitation to anyone that had previously won that competition to enter an all-winners competition.
Right.
And a lot of people either didn't want to enter it, and of those that did, I was chosen as the winner, which was amazing.
So that the title is the Magic Circle Centenary Magician, basically.
It is, yeah, which is completely unusable in the real world.
But which of all of these awards is the one you're most proud of?
That's a good question. I guess coming second at the World Magic Championships was a really big moment for me, because that was on a world stage with world-class competition and some pretty well-known acts. And so for me, that was a huge moment, personally speaking.
Would you ever do it again, FISM?
I would if I felt I had the right type of act. At the moment, I think what I do is too commercial to win a magic competition.
Sure. I want to talk about some of your products, actually, which you've put out, because I looked at the list, and there's a few which I've sort of got here, 4 in particular, which I really like, 3 of which I use every week. Let's talk about Spooked, first of all.
Yeah.
I think that was in the late 90s you came up with that, and it was released. How did you come up with the handling for Spooked?
Yeah, that was the kind of mid-90s that I kind of developed that, and I'll tell you what it was. I was standing in my bedroom practicing, and just fell upon the idea that I could put the cards on the floor and perform, which was essentially a version of Finn John's Esoteric, but with a more modern technology. And then I'd read Mike Close's excellent book, Workers. In fact, he had a whole series of Workers books. And within there was one particular effect called Bloom on Your Hand by Gaten Bloom, and it was Mike Close's work on it. And he had a very specific way of using the gimmick and wearing a certain gimmick. And that's really the missing piece of the puzzle, which brought it all together. And suddenly I was performing what came to be known as Spooked. I think John Allen actually gave me that name one night at the Magic Circle. Again, at the Victory Services Club, I was trying to think of a name for it, and I'm pretty sure he said, call it Spooked.
I did it once, and a girl actually said, God, that's spooky.
Yeah.
I was like, it's like an in-joke.
You're close, but it's Spooked. Yeah, it is an incredible piece of magic, and it's still perhaps the one that most people say to me, can you perform? And if I only had a choice of performing one trick for a group, I think you could do that and then walk away, and they would feel like they've just seen one of the most amazing things they've ever seen. It is staggering.
If you don't know the effect, by the way, it's a haunted deck effect where the deck is placed on the floor and the card really flies out of the deck. Go and look it up right now.
Yeah, actually, it's not. It's something that I'm going to be bringing back to the market, because it's been off the market for a long time. It's not been available, and there are a new generation of magicians that actually have never even seen Spooked or don't even know what it is.
I had the VHS.
Wow, that is a long time ago. Yeah. And before that, it was just a booklet.
Was it really?
Originally, yeah, it was just a booklet.
The newest effect, which I believe this is the newest effect you put out, was the Nest of Wallets. Is that your current, most up-to-date?
No, it's not actually. No, I've just got something newer, which I'm re-releasing. But the Nest of Wallets was, again, it's a real favourite of mine. And the Nest of Wallets isn't an original idea of mine. It's been done for generations. The person who invented it is unknown. Don't know who invented it. I do know that various people have put it out over the years in various qualities. And at the time of me releasing it, it wasn't really available in a decent quality. So we had them made really nicely in leather. And I think what I probably added to the whole thing was really the routining and the thinking behind how I use them. Mm-hmm. And it's one of my staples. I use it every time I work. Can you tell us about the newer effect then that I'm not aware of? Yeah, well, again, going back a long, long time, I came up with, I think it was, again, like the mid to late 90s, I came up with a self-levitation, which I called in-flight. Mm-hmm. And it was basically me standing inside a cardboard box which had cutouts in it, holding a cloth around me, and then rising up in the air. And again, that kind of sold pretty well at that period of time. And I released a couple of different batches of them over the years, but I haven't sold it for the last 10 years or so. And only literally in the last week and a half, I've actually just remade it with brand new materials. It's got a whole interesting kind of really fun routine, and that's what I'll be kind of selling at Blackpool in February.
Paul Daniels put out a version of the cardboard box levitation. And he does credit you on the introduction for it. But does it bother you that there's another version out
On the
there
introduction of what?
Well, there's a video I found on YouTube of him describing the effect in his back garden. He credits you at the beginning as that he saw you do it, and now he's created his own version of it. Are you okay with this sort of version? Because it looks very similar to me.
Am I okay? This is a difficult one to answer. It upsets me in some respects because the effect is identical. So if you were to put one side by side with the other, to the average layman, the effect is identical. Paul bought my trick, and he created a new way to perform his version of it. I don't have any problem with him performing that. I guess I was a little bit upset to hear that he was marketing his version of it because it was just too similar to my version.
Sure.
And I think that it's quite dangerous to be selling something that's so similar to somebody else's without perhaps making sure that person's all right with it.
Right. Okay.
The Magicians Podcast, brought to you in association with the Magic Circle, the world's premier magical society. Are you ready to join the world's most exclusive magic club? Visit themagiccircle.co.uk to find out more.
Gigi-O, free for 30 days. Be a pro. Get Gigi-O.
More from Nick in a moment. He's going to tell us about his experience on Penn Teller Fool Us. If you've never seen the clip of Nick Einhorn on that show, go and look it up right now. It was the most convincing fooling of the series. They had absolutely no idea. But right now, my friends, it's time to talk to you quickly about Gigi-O. If you don't know what it is, it's a web-based software designed for professional and semi-professional entertainers. It's a digital manager, essentially, that will manage all of your business, all of your inquiries. As and when you get your gigs, it will generate PDF contracts and invoices for you. It will update the diary on your phone automatically and even track your payments. Read what others are saying about it and also take a free 30-day trial at gigio.co.uk. That's Gigio, spelled GIGGIO.co.uk.
Whether you're new to magic or a seasoned professional, Alakazam Magic are here to help. Alakazam have been supplying magic to magicians for well over 20 years. Not only do we carry all the latest and greatest magic tricks, books and DVDs, but we also manufacture one of the finest ranges of magic tricks in the world. The Alakazam name is synonymous with great customer service, educated advice and honesty. So if you're shopping for new magic, make sure you check out our website www.alakazam.co.uk or pay a visit to our fully stocked shop.
You did a couple of cruises, I think, back in the day, but that's not a road your career went down sort of in a...
No, well, I always wanted to do cruises. That was one thing that I grew up knowing that magicians worked on cruise ships. And Lawrence Layton, as I mentioned to you before, who is still a very good friend of mine and a good mentor in general. He performed on cruise ships as the Zodiac Brothers and then went on to perform on his own, on cruise ships. And wherever he was in the world, he would send me postcards. And he would just say, "Hi, how you doing? Here I am in Japan, and here I am in, wherever, Norway." And I've still got the postcards from him somewhere. And it used to inspire me. And I always used to think, all I want to do is work on a cruise ship. And I decided a few years ago to try and make that happen. So I did a showcase for Disney cruises, and they weren't at all interested in me. But the guy that set it all up said to me, "I think you might be more suited to some of the other cruise ships that I deal with." And so he put me on a Silver Seas cruise, which was about 300 people and a very small boat, very kind of high-end 6-star luxury cruise liner. And it was great, and I had a lot of fun. It was hard getting 2 lots of 40-minute act together, and so that you can kind of walk on with it. You can't really fly on anything separately. It's tough. It's a tough gig. But it was great, and it went down very well, and they asked me if I wanted to do another one, and I went on, did a couple, actually 2 or 3 of them.
Not something you wanted to pursue in the long term, though?
No, because for me, it took me away from home for too long, and there wasn't as much I mean, financially, it was okay, but I could probably earn a similar amount here at home, and I've got a family, and being away from home isn't really conducive to that family life. So it's nice to do, and in fact, before Jack, my son, was born, Joe and I went, that's my wife, we went from LA to Mexico on a cruise, and that was amazing because we got to have a holiday, and it was a paid-for holiday.
Brilliant.
So that was great. So I may revisit that, hopefully, in 10 years' time when the kids are grown up and we've got some more time and we want to go cruising around the world.
Yeah.
That would be great to do that and actually
get someone else to pay for it.
Exactly.
So 2011, you fooled Penn and Teller on Fool Us. I watched the clip again last night. Absolutely amazing trick, and it floored them. It didn't just like some of the clips on Fool Us. You'll see there's a bit of an argument. They'll go backwards and forwards. No, with you, they had absolutely no idea. I'm really interested to know the background of that trick, how you came up with it, and let's ask that first of all, and then I've got another question I'll add to it.
Okay, so the background of that trick is essentially it's an item that was a published item in a book that I had been performing in a completely different guise for a number of months, maybe even about a year previously. And so when I was asked to do this show, and I really couldn't think of anything that I could do that might fool them, I considered this particular item that I've been performing, but I knew that in its actual state, in its actual form, it wasn't really a TV-worthy trick. Didn't look like it would fill the screen. It was too small, and it just didn't have any suitable routining that I could put to it that would make it worthwhile to put on screen. And so the whole routine is based on this original routine that existed, but with a lot of my own thinking on top of it.
Sure. Can I ask a very direct question? Did you try to perhaps make them think you'd used a stooge in the way you'd selected the lady at the beginning? Because you didn't throw a ball out, you didn't get them to choose the lady, you came out and said, that lady there, and the trick is so amazing, it must have been a thought in their head. In fact, Penn even says it at the end, doesn't he? At the very end, if you listen, he says to her, if you're in on this, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, he does say that.
Was that part of your thought process?
She's actually been dead for 6 years now. She was not a stooge. I knew that they might think she was a stooge, but I also knew that, and you were part of that show as well, you knew that one of the rules was you couldn't use stooges. So I knew that they knew that you couldn't use a stooge, but I wanted to sow an element of doubt into their mind.
Right.
It was a show and it was a competition, and ultimately we're trying to fool them.
Yeah.
So I think lay as many traps as you can, and if they go down that route of she's a stooge, then they're completely going to miss what actually happened.
Yeah, of course. So did you think you were going to fool them before you went on?
I didn't know. I wasn't sure. I thought I had a chance, but I was never 100% sure, even until the moment where they said it.
Sure. What was the feeling like when they said it?
Elation.
Really?
Yeah, it really was amazing. It felt a bit surreal because I was very much aware that I was in a TV studio and that I was being filmed and that it was going to be seen by, potentially millions of people. But at the same time, you are in that moment and you are completely amazed that you fooled them. It was great. I think the biggest moment for me was afterwards, when I walked off of the stage, and in fact I remember going kind of behind the scenes and my heart was pounding and had this feeling of absolute elation that I've just done something that can't be taken away. Hopefully they've pressed record and they've actually got it and it can be shown at a later date.
Yeah, sure. So how was the prize when you go to Vegas?
Well, therein lies another story. It was not really the prize that had been promised, so it wasn't as much fun as it should have been.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way?
I think what had happened is the series wasn't recommissioned for series 2, and so when we went to America, they were fulfilling an obligation to take the winners to America, and I think that Penn and Teller's team had assumed that the production company in the UK were going to look after the act, and I think the production company in the UK had assumed that Penn and Teller's people were going to look after the act.
Okay.
And so as a result, no one was really looked after.
Right, okay.
At all. Well, certainly in my experience, in my case, it wasn't the best of trips.
But you did stand on the stage in the theatre and you did your set. How was that?
Yes, I did. And they were, I have to say, Penn and Teller introduced me really nicely. It was amazing to stand on their stage So at the end of their show, so they performed like a 2-hour show, or an hour and 30 minutes, however long it was, and they mentioned at the start about Penn Teller Fool Us, and there were a lot of British people in the audience, so they were all cheering, and they said, we've got one of the winners here, he's going to be performing afterwards. So there was a big kind of thing made of it, so that was really nice. And then just before I walked on, they kind of gave me the big build-up, and then I walked on to, I think it was about 1,000 people. And I remember my first line, actually, when I walked out, because Penn Teller had just been performing for an hour and a half, so I came out and said, well, unbelievable, Penn Teller, the best warm-up act I've ever had. And that got a huge laugh, and it was great fun. I did 20 minutes of my normal kind of cabaret.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to know that I've stood on stage in Las Vegas, and performed.
So you've been performing magic now for 20 years, full-time professional. Really interested to know, you're going to go out there and do lovely gigs, I'm sure, but every now and again you're going to do a gig that isn't perhaps the right environment for you and your magic. Is it harder to deal with that when you've been doing it for 20 years than it was, say, 15 years ago?
No, I think if anything, it's slightly easier, because with 20 years of experience, you've kind of come across everything. You've walked into a room where there's 40 people, but they're all around one table. You've walked into a room that's so small that you can't really even squeeze between the tables. Or you've been performing for 25 minutes and then the host says, right, all the men swap tables and swap places, and you just think, no, that's the worst thing that could happen for a close-up magician, and you have to deal with all of those things. So 20 years in, you kind of know what to expect, and it's very rare that something comes up, a situation which you haven't seen before, or you don't really know how to deal with.
Do you still enjoy performing close-up magic after all this time?
I do. I love it, because every performance is a fresh new performance for the people that are watching.
Yeah.
I think we always have to bear in mind, and something I learned early on from Marvin's Magic days, is that whilst you're performing for the 1,000th time that trick, people are seeing it for the first time, and that's how they should view it, as someone that's fresh, and so I do enjoy it, and I think that every close-up gig gives you the ability to get new reactions and fresh reactions. Of course, there are days when you go out and perform when you think, well, it's a bit like standing on a treadmill and then doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably the same with any job.
Of course, yeah. Is the Magic Circle important to you? You've won loads of awards, or you've been a member. You're a member of the Inner Magic Circle with Gold Star. Tell me how you feel about the Magic Circle.
Yeah, I love the Magic Circle. I love what it stands for. I love the people that put so much time and dedication into running it, the committee, the council. I think they do a fantastic job. I'm in no way politically minded at all, so I've never stood into that kind of breach and done anything like that. But I think the actual organisation is phenomenal in terms of promoting magic. It's obviously got a great reputation outside of magic. Everyone's heard of the Magic Circle. It gives members the chance to use the museum. We've got the club night on a Monday, which is just great. We have some fantastic lecturers in, and gives me a chance to socialise with friends and colleagues.
Yeah.
And they've always been very supportive of me, and hopefully I kind of have been supportive of the Magic Circle, and you kind of give back where you can in any way that you can.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's been very, very good for me and magic in general.
It's an interesting question. If you could change one thing about the Magic Circle, what would you change?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'd probably change the way in which the Inner Magic Circle badge is given out.
Yeah.
In the sense that I think that it should be reserved in a much more dedicated way than it currently perhaps is, and I include myself in that. I think that if you've received the membership of the Inner Magic Circle and you're 21 or 23, it's great as it is. It doesn't give you anything to work towards, and I think that if they held that off for certain people, and I include myself in that again, until such time as you've really done something exceptional, I think that may be a good thing to do. But
Yep.
It makes no difference to members in general. I don't think it makes any difference to the public.
Yeah. What is it that you think makes you a top end magician in comparison? There's lots of magicians out there doing gigs for 300 quid. What is the difference, Nick, with you being a top guy, working for top clients, for top money? What is the difference maker in your eyes? What makes you different from the pack?
Well, I think first of all, if you want it, you have to ask for it. If you don't ask for a certain fee, you're never going to get it. So no one's going to say, "Oh, I'm going to give you an extra 300 quid,"
Right.
because you're a nice guy.
Yeah.
They're never going to do that. So if you want a certain rate, you have to ask for a certain rate. Second of all, you have to back that up with a hopefully a quality product or service. And there's a good question that I do ask myself quite a lot, which is, if I was arrested today for being a professional magician, would there be enough evidence for a conviction? and I think sometimes magic is not just about doing good tricks. It's about answering the phone in the right way. It's about giving people good advice. When they call and they say, and I ask them what kind of event they're having, because everyone has different events. You can't. It's all very well saying I do a 2-hour rate and a 3-hour rate, but some people may not need a 2-hour rate or 3-hour rate, and their event may not run like the last one you did. And so I think it's steering customers or clients in the right direction. And if they don't need me for 3 hours, I would rather say, you don't need me for 3 hours, you need me for an hour and a half, rather than say, I'll do 3 hours because I'm going to get more money from you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, and I think that the way that you deal with clients, and certainly the end service, if you're doing a really good job, and people come away telling their host or hostess that they've had a fantastic time and they thought the magician was the best person they've ever seen in their life, then you're going to get repeat bookings. And I think that's what really counts, is doing such a good job that they want to book you again, or tell their friends to go and book you.
Yeah. What do you enjoy away from magic, if you do occasionally get a day off? Or I'm interested to know who Nick Einhorn is away from the magic world, really.
Yeah. I guess at home I'm pretty much full time with either magic or family. We've got 2 young kids, and it's kind of spending time with them, hopefully taking them to football or swimming or wherever they go, and it's playtime with the kids, really. There's not much time outside of that. So I do tend to spend a lot of time reading magic books. I don't watch loads of television, so I used to play golf, but not so much anymore. So most of my spare time, I suppose, is spent just thinking about magic or reading magic books.
Do you wish you'd have sort of gone after television a little bit more? You've been the corporate option. You don't in any way, of no interest? No,
I've done enough of television to know that I enjoy doing it. It's a challenge. I mean, I've done a few different things in a few different environments and live TV, and it's an amazing experience. And I would do it again if I was asked to do it. But I've never chased fame. I've never chased television. And if ever an opportunity came up, I certainly wouldn't say no to it if I felt it was the right opportunity for me. But again, it's not really what I'm aiming to do. I'm very happy kind of as a commercial magician.
We're going to go to some more general questions, but I'm really interested to hear these from you. Who's your favourite magician of all time?
Well, that is an interesting question.
Hang on, he's just picked up a piece of paper here.
Well, I'll tell you, I knew this question was coming. And the truth of the matter is, there are so many people that influenced me growing up. Because I grew up on a diet of Paul Daniels and Wayne Dobson and, Stuff the White Rabbit and the Magic Comedy Strip, the Magic Comedy Hour, all of these different shows that were on TV. It was a real exciting time for magic. So I was influenced by those guys. And I guess, there are certain people that I think most magicians who are my age were influenced by. That would be David Copperfield and Paul Daniels and Wayne Dobson. But then, Alan Shaxson, the late Alan Shaxson, was an absolute legend and such a gentleman and so good to me. I cannot tell you. He from a very early age, he inspired me. He helped me. He's a very, very good man, and I really admired his showmanship and how the fact that you could put him in front of any audience, old or young, and he would never insult anyone, and the magic would always be flawless. And he was a real gentleman. And so Alan, massive influence. I think there are people, favourite magicians. I mean, I love Richard Sanders. I think he's a brilliant magician. I think I love watching him. I love his personality. Bill Malone, again, larger than life. Just enjoy him. I would never try and emulate these people. But, David Williamson, again, fantastic. Jeffrey Durham, I think, is... it's just, he knows so much about magic, and I've got to know him, and he's given me lots of excellent advice. And then there's people like, Chris Kenner, who I think wrote, Out of Control was one of the best books I ever bought. And of course he works side by side with David Copperfield now. And I've had the pleasure of kind of meeting Chris a few times and chatting with him, and his magic is superb. And so I love his work. Josh J, I like him. Rune Clan. And then a couple of months ago I was sitting at the Magic Circle watching Duncan Trillo do his act, and that act, with the dancing handkerchief and the carbon nips, it made me feel like a kid again, and it reminded me of everything that I loved about magic. It's a fantastic act. So there's so many magicians. I know I've not mentioned so many that I do admire, but they're just a selection.
Duncan Trillo was on the Magicians podcast. You can look him up in the feed. He was episode 16 if you want to hear all about that act. How about a favourite trick for you?
For me to perform, or
no, not
just
necessarily.
in general?
Yeah, like maybe let's do both. So let's do first of all the one that you perform, that you love, and then perhaps one that you saw that just you went, wow.
Okay, so favourite trick that I perform would probably be Spooked.
Yeah,
absolutely. Fallen in love with it. I mean, there's a few things that I do that I really like. I mean, the Nest of Wallets is it's killer stuff. So probably Spooked would be my favourite. And then in terms of people that I've seen, I mean, Armando's Coin Menagerie is just incredible, breathtaking. I've seen him do it live several times, and it is sensational. Mm-hmm. So for me, that is as close to real magic as it gets. But then I remember seeing on the Best of Magic, Finn John performing a serpent necktie routine, which for me again was just such a magical thing to watch. And if you haven't seen it, you should try and find it on YouTube or something. It is absolutely brilliant. And I spoke to him about it because I phoned him to find out if he would be prepared for me to do it. Because I did a show a couple of years ago and I was trying to find some new material, and I managed to contact him and I said, I'd love to perform your routine. I'm not sure it's ever been in print. Could I have a permission to do it? And he told me in no uncertain terms that he would not be happy if I did perform it. And so that was the end of that. And I never really thought about performing it, but I love it as a piece. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Best gig you ever did? It could be a contract or just one specific night. One night of your
there
career.
are two that stand out immediately, actually. One was performing my act in a competition at the London Palladium. And that for me was very special. To stand in front of a public audience.
Your wife's parents were in the audience that night. I remember you reading about this.
That's true.
That was a big deal for you, I think, wasn't it?
It was a big deal because it was a Palladium. I had not been long with my then girlfriend, and so her parents came to see me for the first time perform magic at the London Palladium, which was bizarre, and it was a really nerve-wracking. Jeremy Beadle introduced me.
Right.
And who, by the way, was a lovely, lovely man. And I did, my 15 minutes, and I felt like a king afterwards. I mean, it was amazing. I still got a video of it somewhere. I haven't even put it on DVD. I don't even know where the video is. But, just going out, and I think my first line, which James Friedman actually gave me, my first line got a huge laugh, and then that laughter rolled into applause. And it was just a magical moment for me.
You mentioned some TV magic series that you enjoyed. Is there one in particular, though, that, when you were a kid, it was really, inspirational to you?
I think I would always check the schedule every single day for David Copperfield. Is he going to be on TV today? That for me was, obviously Paul Daniels was on TV every Saturday night. It was a given that I would sit and watch that and record it and rewatch it 100 times. Each episode. When Copperfield was on doing his special, that for me was the pinnacle. It didn't get any better than that. It was amazing.
Did you go and see him in the mid-90s when he came over?
Yeah, I'd seen him previous to that because we went to Canada with my family, and I think there's a place in Canada in Toronto called Wonderland or something. And it was like a big theme park, and he was doing a show there. And so we went to see him, and we were sitting quite far back, and there were some spare seats near the front, and my mum and dad said, why don't you just go and sit in one of the spare seats? So I went right near the bottom, and as he kind of walked past, he gave me 5. And, as a 12-year-old kid or something, that meant an awful lot. It was great.
Yeah.
And I received a letter from him on my bar mitzvah that my mum and dad managed to get. which I still have to this day, with some advice from David Copperfield.
Wow.
So that was great. And then, of course, when he was over here, I saw him both at Earl's Court and then at the Labatt's Apollo in Hammersmith.
Which one did you prefer, the arena or the smaller venue?
Well, I think he came back, I may be wrong, but I think he came back to do the smaller venue because the larger venue was so big. I think it didn't have the intimate feel that he wanted for his London gig.
Yeah. So
I think he'd done the Earl's Court thing, and then I think he came back. I may well be wrong, but I think one of the main reasons for him coming back was because I think it was a much more intimate experience. I love both of them. You know, I'm a huge Copperfield fan, so anytime I see him, I enjoy it.
You're the final guest on the final episode of the series, and this is the final question, and it's the same final question every week. What advice would you give to a young magician who's hopefully listening to this podcast now, who's would love to have your career in 15 years' time? Well,
first of all, thank you for asking me to be a guest, and thank you for the series, because it's been brilliant, and I've listened to every single one of them. My advice to an up-and-coming would be that you don't have to be the best magician in the world. You've just got to be the best magician that your audience has ever seen. Okay, so, understand that you are not Bill Malone, you are not David Williamson, but who you are is you. And if people like you, they will like your magic and they will like what you perform. And the more of your own personality that you can inject, even though it may not seem special to you, if you're an extension of your own self when you're performing, I truly believe that people will find you as a defined character. It may not be the defined character of someone that you think you would like to be, but it will be your own version of yourself that no one else can take, and you'll feel comfortable performing as yourself.
Nick, that was a great answer. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, Nick, for your time. A really great podcast to finish the series with. Einhorn.co.uk is Nick's website. You can go and have a look at lots of clips of him performing on there, and also contact him through the website directly if you're interested in any of his effects which he has released. And that, my friends, is the end of the series. 6 months ago, I thought it might be fun to create a podcast series of informal interviews with the biggest names in magic. I was right. It's been a lot of fun. In my head at the start of the project, I committed to 24 episodes with a new episode every Friday. I'm delighted that we never missed a week, and that would not have been possible without the support of my 3 sponsors, Alakazam, The Magic Circle, and Gigio. I'd also like to thank Rob James for his support and encouragement, and for being a proof listener every single week. He kept me going when times got tough and I was up against it with the weekly deadline. Thank you to all of my guests for donating their time and sharing some great information and insight into their careers. And finally, thank you to all of you for listening. I sincerely hope you've got something from this series. I have one final thing to ask of you. There are still lots of magicians out there who do not know about this series. I know because I got an email just yesterday from someone who has only just discovered the podcast feed. As there are now 24 episodes, 24 different top magicians, and 24 hours of content, I would really appreciate your help to spread the word about the feed. Perhaps you could mention it on your Facebook, tweet about it, or even just email a link to a friend. It would be a shame to not share all of the information here with as many magicians as possible to help improve all aspects of what we do with our magic. I'm not sure at the moment if we're going to do a second series. It's been an enormous amount of work and I need a break for a bit. However, if you would like to hear a second series, let me know. My email is info@richardyoungmagic.com, or you can tweet me or leave a message on the Magicians Podcast Facebook page. Maybe one day we will be back to do it all over again. This is Richard Young signing off. Thanks for listening and goodbye.